All right, what's going on, guys? So, upon technically, it's going to be yesterday's release, but this is coming out the day after, technically, because it's 11:30 at night, so it's almost the next day. And by the time I finish recording this and upload it, it's gonna finish uploading on the next day. But I've always wanted to write a full length studio album demo and try and tour it and possibly get signed to a label, between doing cover songs like many bands get famous with and doing my own original material. But wanted to write a track, a demo. Everybody, if you follow my channel, know who I am. The Just Above Freezing. The tracks. I've written so many riffs, lyrics, album art, named the band, worked on everything. It's basically all I have to do. The album cover is complete. The song track listing is complete. I've made lyrics for half the album. I've made drum beats for almost half to three quarters of the album. And I've made bass riffs. And we have guitar players who've literally just handed me riffs because they saw my genius. I have so much riffs in music and material written that I've all gathered just by myself. I've either gathered insights or made it all by myself. Most of it's original, but some of it's a couple of the guitarists have thrown me their riffs, like I just said. But anyways, I've done so much work that when it does come time for me, and I did it on purpose because now that I got a job, I can save up and rise up in their company, and eventually get higher wages, and be the truck driver. I've always wanted to be, and truck drivers make a lot of money. I want to throw down some money for an album, and on the weekends go in and produce a demo and just go out and start hitting bars and trying to get, to clubs, and then possibly even opening, so I can finally replace my employment with music. The reason I'm mentioning all that is to say that, now that Reality's Individual has been released today, that's 6 technical studio releases of electronically made music that I've all made originally. By the way, all 6 of these records that we're about to discuss today, it's an album ranking, are all original. I made everything by hand. And it's about at least 3.5 hours of music combined between all the records. And I've made a plethora of just awesome music already. And this is all independent. I was able to basically take the role of saxophonist, keyboardist, drummer, singer, guitar player, bass player, all these different types of instruments, just by using a app, and I will shout them out. It's called BandLab. You can make your own music and shit if you know what you're doing. But that's what we're gonna kind of discuss today, and I'm gonna delve deeply into each one of these records and kind of why. Because what usually sets these albums apart for me is not only the production, the quality, but also the colors on the album cover, the way the cover was designed, the name of the record, the name of the songs, the lyrics, if there are any. The quality of the production, and the organization and choice of instruments for each song and each record. So that's kind of is what's going to sway my opinions here. The bottom one, which you see on screen already, we're going to talk about in a second, but that's my worst one by a long shot. The rest are great. Even there are still some tracks on Liminal Shane here that are worth listening to. But if you're going to check out my music, I would probably just skip this one. But there's, like I said, I don't want to say that because there are some songs on this record that are actually very good and they stand out, because it didn't take me long to figure out what I was doing and how to really make some epic songs, and then from there on out it just exploded. But what's going to set the 4th and 3rd pick apart and the 2nd and 1st pick apart are very close. So to kind of think of the 3rd and 4th ranked records, I should say, and the 1st and 2nd ranked records together individually as 2 stepping stones. So like the 3rd and 4th picks are in the middle, and the 1st and 2nd picks are top tier, if that makes sense. So let's get into it. So Liminal Shane here. Like I said, I spoke about this, but obviously, There's some good songs on here. Choir from Purgatory. Um, Cast Out, Reel In, the opening track's a good song. Embrace the Void Part 1 and 2, specifically Part 1, but 2 is good too, are great songs. The keyboard instrumental and the electronic overdriven bass instrumental are very good, but the title track isn't super great. Hurry Up Wait isn't good. Corner of the Room is a pretty bad song. And obviously, it's my first song I ever made, but the album closer, 10 Hits Deep, is not very great to listen to. You can see a level of musical immaturity at that point, even though at that point, just a year and a half ago, I had been studying music for about 10 years prior, but a lot of my music has exploded recently. If you actually watch, which is what I'm going to get into upon the first and second picks, but my music abilities, meaning my choice of instruments, my choice of production, my choice of lyrics, organizing my records, I've matured so much in music. It's incredible. Like, I actually hate to say this, but I'm allowed to. That if I were to be given a studio and a deal, I could record a phenomenal record and feel confident in myself that I could make a awesome album. And I'm talking about with instruments too. That's how good I've gotten at making electronic records. Between analyze, because I've analyzed shows, concerts, bands, genres of music, instruments, album art. I've analyzed interviews from multiple bands: Marilyn Manson, Slipknot, Slayer, Pantera, Metallica, Korn, AC/DC, Van Halen, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. The list goes on and on. But through my life, I've played French horn. I started with the French horn. I played trumpet after that for a little while and then quit. I've learned how to play keyboards, and obviously now that I've done these albums, keyboard is not even a word I should use. Just fucking sampler at this point. I'm so good at it. I started out, if you want to consider rock and roll instruments, just hardcore rock and roll. I started out on, if you guys remember, I started out on lead guitar, and it didn't really click right away. And then a couple years later, I picked up a drum set and played drums for about 3 years and wrote all the drum beats. I haven't written any lead guitar riffs, but I used to know the chords on lead guitar. But I wrote a ton of intricate, awesome ride cymbal use of Tom's double bass kick drums and snare and hi-hat. I've made tons of drum beats for our first record. When we get the big studio break and stuff, YouTube's starting to blow up a little bit too. My channel's going up. I'm literally 200 views away from 200,000 total views on my channel, and I'm at 372 subs currently as I speak. So, it's definitely starting to get some notoriety. But especially now that I picked up the bass guitar, if you see my videos and stuff, I'm playing like Van Halen bassist Michael Anthony, Cliff Burton, Les Claypool. I'm starting to actually shred and do intricate spider chordy, neck sweeping, complex and difficult riffs and nailing them perfectly. So, yeah, from this record, which is my first record, till the number one pick, you will see a level of maturity in my albums over time. So let's move on. But Liminal Shane, it's worth listening to, but if you're going to listen to it, select individual tracks. Don't listen to it front to back. The Sky Holds the Answers. Now, the reason this is so low is because this was kind of more of a concept album. At the time of this recording, this actually is not only ranked number 5, but it was the 5th release I've ever did. At the time that this was released, I had only released Liminal Shane, Sunset Serenade, End LP, and No Way Out, and I wanted to because my catalog at that time consisted of 46 tracks. Now it consists of 61, but at the time it consisted of 46 tracks, and I wanted there to be 50. So I thought, well, okay, so 46 and 50, that's a difference of 4. There's 4 records. So I decided to make 4 songs for this album and have each song in order hold the vibe of each record. So the first track on this EP holds the vibe of Liminal Shane. The second holds the vibe of Sunset Serenade. The third holds the vibe of NLP. And the fourth and closing track holds the vibe of No Way Out. And the reason why this is so low is because the songs on here are not shitty. Actually, they're very good, and I did a good job in encompassing the concept I was going for. But because it's a concept, quote unquote, album, and because it's so short and compact, I had to put it lower than the other ones, quite obviously. But real quick, I will rank the album covers in a from worst to best. Before we actually, because like I said, I consider every aspect of the record, the recording process, the organization of the instruments, the choices of instruments, the lyrics of the irony, the song titles, the album title, the colors, the album cover. I consider every little small aspect when I rank my own music and other people's as well. So, but the reason I'm ranking the album covers right here is because this is number one for me. I do love the cover of this album. I think it's sweet. It looks very cool. It catches your eye too, especially that orange in the middle, because I chose black and gray for the rest of it. But yeah, this would be number one. Number two, I would say, I know I said worst to best, but I screwed up, and I'm just gonna go with it. That's another thing you learn about guitar. If you notice, I screw up, but you turn a screw up into a if you can turn a screw up into a win, basically, where like you fuck up a riff but then recover very quickly, or turn it, if you fuck up a note, you just keep playing that way so it looks like you didn't fuck up. That's the way you do that. It's pretty smart. Yeah, this album cover's number one. I would say the album cover for Reality's Individual will be number two. Number three, the cover for Sunset Serenade would be number three. The cover for End LP would be number four. The cover for No Way Out would be number five, because it's just my ancestry, and my lineage traced back to the Mayflower settlers, the first Caucasian Americans to show up in America and settle it. I'm actually related to Richard Warren on the Mayflower. You can look it up, but Richard Warren, you can look him up. But and then obviously at the bottom, if you paid attention, would be Liminal Shade. I think the album cover is not great. But yeah, that's why The Sky Holds the Answers is lower than almost everything else, except for Liminal Shade. So, like I said, the third and fourth pick and the first and second pick were very close to each other, respectively. But I had to put this one lower because this album, if you listen to this album, it has the most classic rock elements out of any of my records. You have a very raw drum sound, a lot of slap bass, twangy bass, and some heavy moments. There's a lot of experimentation on this record. I mean, End LP and Reality's Individual End LP is straight death metal, and Reality's Individual is straight psychedelic. But a lot of my other records, including this one, tend to be a very experimental and kind of like a Mr. Bungle, Faith No More style, where the genre tends to change a lot in one song, or the genre changes a lot throughout the record in general. And that's why I kind of like it. But this one, what broke the tie was the production on this record. And I'm not talking about like how I played in the notes I chose. I think this record is elite, and at this point, we're getting into the territory where all the records from here and up are 100% worth listening to front to back. You can spin these front to back, and you won't be disappointed. But this album just is, the production is not the best compared to the top picks, and that's kind of what sets it apart, honestly, is that, and this record has a classic rock element to it, but wherever there isn't classic rock, I went for a creepy vibe instead. So this record's got some moments in it that sound really, really eerie. And if you are a faint of heart type of person and you're scared of the dark or whatever, there are some songs on this record I would avoid. And that's kind of why I put it lower, because I'm also considering the vibe it gives off. And that's kind of what broke the tie between this record and the next pick, is that it's too creepy sometimes, and it can be unsettling if you're not if you're, like I said, if you're a faint of heart type individual. But it's good musically. If you can look past the creepiness, you can appreciate how well I crafted the songs, and how well I ordered the track list and titled the songs, and had the kind of the title of the song and the picture I used for the song encompass the overall vibe I was going for. Which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but yeah, all these records. There's an app. It's called BandLab. Like I don't know. I'm not sure if I said it, but I want to emphasize. I want to shout them out. That BandLab is the reason why I was able to make all these songs, and I made them all originally. I opened the studio from scratch and picked the instruments myself and organized everything myself for every one of these records. Not one of these songs was made for me. I made them myself because I remember when I first opened the app a year and a half ago to make my first ever song, it gave me a template and I started using it. And I thought, you know what, this is bullshit. I want it to be from the heart and original. And and because I did it that way instead and made everything original, you can hear that it's a lot better than what it would have been if I had just used someone else's music, because I believe I'm a lot better at music than most people, but whatever. I'm allowed. That's the one. I don't like bragging, but I give myself extreme bragging rights in the area of musical abilities. Amongst other things like art and video games and coordination in general and football and sports, but fuck all that. But yeah, no, this record, it's still worth listening to though. It's very good. But like I said, a little bit too raw of a tone in some areas, and in a lot of the areas, there's a lot of very creepy music. But some of the songs in here are stand out more than some of the songs on any of the other records. I think the song "Alien Invasion" on this record is it's top tier. It really is. And I also like the song "Blessed Are the Confused." I think "Blessed Are the Confused" is good too. But yeah, this record is worth listening to. Like I just said before we move on, we're about to move on. That this record and the rest of what we're about to discuss are worthy of listening to. Okay, so now we got the one that won the tiebreaker. Now, what set this record above this one was that NLP, even though, like what I'll say is, if you don't like brutal, because there's not one keyboard in here. Actually, there actually technically is one keyboard ending. I hit one note on a scratchy sounding keyboard to end one of the songs, and I made it sound like it was just an unplugged amp. So technically there's one note of a keyboard on this entire record. Everything else is, I picked the heaviest drum set, the heaviest bass guitar, and I picked Djent for this entire record. It is a literal death metal, sometimes even deathcore, grindcore style here. And if you don't like metal, don't spin this. However, I know that if you are even thinking of clicking on this video, then that means you've listened to these records, and you can appreciate that I have a very diverse style and a diverse choice of music a lot. I can listen to anything from grindcore to R&B and soul from the 70s. So, and anything in between, except the only genre I don't like is country music. But I use acoustic, but acoustic isn't necessarily country. I use a lot of acoustic in some of these records, but that's just to make it more psychedelic. I like psychedelic rock though, and you'll hear that in a second, in aspects. But no, this record, what sets it higher and what sets it number 3 is, not only do I love metal, and I'm sure if you've listened to this one in its entirety, then you can appreciate metal. But the reason why this one is so high is because I, for one, had a blast making this. Some of the records, I will admit, I felt kind of forced to finish some of these songs and didn't want to finish them or didn't like the direction they went. But, I was annoyed but kept reworking them and eventually became satisfied. But they're not one of these recordings on this record that I did not have fun with. I've had a lot of fun. I'm not saying I just hair in my mouth. I'm not saying I had a not fun time making any of these records, but like this one was the most fun. But what also sets this even higher in my mind is the musical complexity. Out of all my records, and obviously the top 2 picks are more complex technically, but this one, out of the guitar work, is the most complex. It is some of the blast beats, guitar riffs, and bass riffs, and the combination of any of those 3 at some point in this record are almost alien. They're so intense. And even if they're not, it's amazing. This album, if you like heavy metal, is worth listening to. Now, if you don't like heavy metal and you don't like brutal music, don't listen to this. But as far as, because I take every aspect, but as far as the name, the song titles, the organization, the vibe I went for, the colors and the complexity, this one was better than No Way Out by a long shot. Not a long shot. No Way Out and this one are actually very close, but the musical complexity alone is what set this one higher, and it's at number 3. At number 2, we have Sunset Serenade. Before I released the number 1 pick, which if you've been paying attention, you'll know what that one is. I crowned Sunset Serenade for the longest time as my crowning achievement. However, what sets apart this record from the number 1 spot is so minor, but it is just a slight more maturity and kind of just analyzation of music, and you can tell that I got even better at making this style of music. However, I fucking love Sunset Serenade. Songs like, actually the best song I ever made is on this record. It's an acoustic guitar solo inspired by Eddie Van Halen's little guitars, and it sounds similar. You should go listen to it. It's called Mellifluous Melody. But songs like Mellifluous Melody, Serendipity, Hash Prince, They'll Be With Us Forever, Hieroglyphic Paradise, I mean, you name it. The Iceberg of Mushroom Mountain. I mean, if you like actually listen to this thing and analyze this thing, I know I said the top 4, and yes, the top 4 are worth the spinning. But if you don't want to waste too much time and you just want to spin a couple of my albums, I would suggest Sunset Serenade and the one we're about to discuss in the number 1 spot above any of them, because this has the most diverse but yet somehow intertwined, perfect, interconnected, well-renowned, polished, psychedelic vibe to it. It's like, I know it sounds stupid saying that, but there's no other way I can describe how good this music actually sounds. And I know I sound like I'm bragging, but if you actually listen to these top 2 picks out of my albums and the ranking, Sunset Serenade in the number 1 spot, you will not be disappointed. There's not one moment on either one of these records that is dull. And actually, this record, I should, in theory, have put this higher, but I like the number 1 pick better. But this one has a couple songs with lyrics in it still. I actually don't like... So, my most recent 4 releases... The Sky Holds the Answers, No Way Out, NLP, and Reality is Individual, I chose to not sing because I think it takes away from the music. Because you see, I like to emphasize the musical aspect of it. Because I'm an instrumentalist, one thing I will admit, I'm an excellent musician and performer. But one thing that I never enjoyed myself was singing. However, I sang on every song on the first record except for Choir from Purgatory, which is ironic because that was the last song I made for that record too. And I sung on 2 out of the 11 tracks on this record we're discussing right here. And those were the last songs I ever recorded. In fact, the last audio of my voice on any of these records I ever recorded was the lyrics and singing for Hash Prince, which I do think is a phenomenal song, by the way. But I like this record too because it's a turning point, because it was my final nod to my singing days. Because it's not that I don't know how to sing. I have a very beautiful voice. If you see, I just did it right there. You can hear it. I have a beautiful voice. I just don't like to sing. I think it's cringy, in my opinion. I think singing is cringy. But it's necessary, because even though I think it's cringy, that's not what sells albums, and that's not what makes an album complete. So when I go... because I'm done making these. There's nothing I want to say in this video. I'm done. I'm never making another one of these albums again, which is why I'm ranking them now, because I'm not doing it ever again. But I want to make a real record with real instruments and real band members too, and I'm working on that currently right now. However, there's going to be a lead singer. There has to be singing. But because I made these projects as completely original but solo projects, I was able to do what I wanted with them. And I chose to leave the singing out of most of it. And that's why I like Sunset Serenade, because it is the quintessential album that I made. I think it's beyond perfect. But nothing will compare to Reality's Individual. I just released this yesterday, and I've loved the recording of this, and I've loved the way I made this record so much that I've been listening to, even though I just released these songs anywhere from 3 days ago to 2 weeks ago when I started recording and making this music. I love it so much that I listen to these songs constantly. And now that the record's out, I just even today have listened to it a couple times back to back. And I, just by listening to it those 2 times, because I'm very analytical too. I'm extremely, I'm almost psychotically analytical. I can hear something once and compare it to many other things all at once. And that's what I did with this. But upon that comparison, I believe that this, by far, is my best work. Now, Sunset Serenade, like we just discussed, is very, very, very good. Almost close to this. But this record right here shows how far I have matured in music. I mean, like I said, I played a multitude of instruments. I've studied live concerts, watched bass players and guitarists how they move their fingers, how they form their notes and their riffs. And that's how I've learned. I've self-taught myself all this shit. I've analyzed lyrics, interviews, live performances, like I said, interviews with producers like Terry Dayton, Bob Rock, and stuff like that. I've analyzed so much fucking music and listened to so many different styles of music that I've, believe it or not, have become this, I don't want to say superhuman, because that's not, no one's superhuman and I'm not perfect, but I've become an extremely well-renowned musician, and it shines like a star on Reality is Individual. I think that this record right here is amazing, and if, I blow up, I feel like this would be the one that people would listen to, because even though there's no lyrics, that's what makes it even more powerful. Is the music is so intricate, so intertwined, so intense, so well organized. My choices of instruments, my choices of titling, the way I chose to organize the track listing, the album cover, the album colors, the endings, the opener, the closing, the fact that I chose a solo, the fact that I chose the opening track to be the title track. Everything about this record, the sound, like I said, the style, the psychedelic aspect, because this whole record is almost entirely psychedelic. The keyboards, the synth, the saxophone, the winds, the trumpet, the other horns, the guitar, bass, acoustic, the leads, the 808s, everything is just fucking perfect. And that's the only way I'm going to end this video in a half hour. But out of my 6 records, the top 4 are worth listening to front to back, but this one and Sunset Serenade are just some of my best work of all time. Besides some of my bass solos, though, I will say, and my bass videos, especially, I actually just recently created a playlist. If you want to hear how good I am at music, even just playing an instrument, watch. If you scroll through my playlists, I took some of my best bass work, because there's a ton of it. There's too much to go through by yourself. I took some of my best bass work and organized it into a playlist of about 6 videos. And if you listen to all 6, 7 of those videos I threw in there, especially in the past 3 months, it's come to a head. There comes, what I will say, if you're a musician and you're struggling, is don't quit trying, because it's just like getting a runner's high. I hit my music breakthrough about 3-4 months ago, because I played so many different instruments, done so many different things. It literally will happen. I promise you that you will hit it's basically like an epiphany, where all of a sudden you will just become this monster on guitar, and this monster in your ability to produce and organize music and album art and lyrics and song titles and covers and stuff like that. But I'll end this in 30 minutes. I love you guys. Peace and love. You know the drill. Subscribe, like, comment. But yeah, it's anything is possible. And that's what I'll say. Bye.